So, we really have much good segue into what this panel is about. And the reason we're doing this panel here is because from talking to the team here, it's clear that intellectual property is the core focus of what's being developed here. So I thought it would be a perfect topic for tonight. I'd love to get our panelists to introduce themselves first. So Bill, if you want to start.
Bill Bridges, HDI, partner with Andrew, doing Fate and Sons. Previously and actually concurrently worked at White Wolf, developing their massive World of Darkness IP. Every element of it, from werewolves to mage to changelings, fairies, even Frankenstein.
Some of the better vampires.
There you go, too. Vampire.
Paul Jenkins, I'm the head of the studio here at TMNT Studios. I have had a history in all types of media, as you probably know. I was the second employee of the Ninja Turtles here. I created the origin of Wolverine for Marvel. I created Inhumans for them. I created original materials for God of War. I've worked on The Darkness, and now I'm currently directing Ninja Turtles for Nickelodeon and doing everything. There you go.
I'm Blake Lewin. I have two hats right now. So tonight I'm going to be Cyan, head of business development for the guys who made Mist and Riven. But in my local persona, I'm president of Atlanta Game Cooperative. And the idea of the cooperative is to bring game development business here to Atlanta so we can all work and don't have to leave. So I am looking for Unity guys. I'm looking for a bunch of other guys. Anybody who is interested in working that is already freelance and no prior commitments, please see me afterwards and I'll see if I can get you busy.
And I'm Andrew Greenberg. I'll be moderating tonight, but I've been involved in the game industry since '90. As the developer of a game called Vampire the Masquerade at White Wolf, where Bill came on and worked on all those properties, but I've also worked on a number of other properties. So has Bill, including, for instance, Star Trek, Warhammer 40K, and the like. So we've developed our own IP, we've worked on other people's intellectual properties, and we've seen them done well, and we've seen them done very poorly. Oh, and we do have one panelist, two other panelists who aren't on this up here right now. Spencer Reeve from Cool Mini or Not is running late. They do very cool miniature games, do great Kickstarters, and he's going to be here to talk about some of what they do. And our man in the audience is TJ. So if any of the legal questions about IP come up, we're all just going to look at you, TJ, and say, please answer. TJ is secretary of the GGDA board and an excellent IP lawyer and business lawyer in general. So if you have any legal questions,
other people sue over, I wouldn't have to.
So he's definitely the guy to go to for any of this. So the way I initially planned to structure this was we talk first about why we focus on IP as opposed to just making another platformer, and then how to do it, and then how to develop it past a single game. But it sounds like there's a lot of interest in IP development in general in the audience. So if you do have questions, once we've gotten started, don't be afraid to raise your hands, and we can veer off of those into any other areas that you want to talk about. So, so intellectual property, again, this is the big picture. I think Paul's example of the Ninja Turtles is a great one. Here are 4 knockoffs of a bunch of different comic book tropes who suddenly become this massive thing in comics, TV, games. Did it claim to have the initial?
Claim out the game.
Underwear.
Electronic talking toothbrush. That was one of mine.
So that's one group that's done it effectively. But let's start off with the question of why do you focus on IP in the beginning? What do you focus on when you're developing IP?
What I'll do is, let me start, because I've got real strong thoughts on it, just for guests. And I want to free everybody. You know, the issue at hand is this, right? Why are you trying to be entertained? Go right there first. Because the truth is, you simply need to be entertained because it reflects the human condition. It's a reflection of you. So when I lecture at colleges, a lot of the way that I start is I always say the first thing is this. The first book that you read was possibly The Little Boy, the Little Girl, and the Dog. In Britain it's called Dick and Jane and Spot the Dog. Is it called that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You stole literature.
I'm going to guess the other way around.
You stole Winnie the Pooh too.
Yeah, that's right. We stole Winnie the Pooh off you guys.
Lord of the Rings.
That's right, Lord of the But at its most basic level, we hold up this book to read as little kids. If you're a little boy, you go, I'm a little boy. If you're a little girl, you say, I'm a little girl. If you're a weird kid like me, you go, I think I'm the dog. But what you then hold up is a mirror. It's not a book, it's a mirror. And so everything that we experience as story is simply a reflection of us. The problem is that we narrowly define what story is. We've so narrowly defined it. I think that what's happening right now is a story. I'm sitting here, got my mates around, people walking around, cameras going, Andrew's there, I'm seeing faces, and this is my story. So when I go to sleep tonight, I remember, what was my day like? What did I have? What happened? I don't live inside your brains, I live inside your mind. And so I experience story at every moment of my day, and I think that's what we actually do. That's why story can't just be defined as a book or a film. I'm obviously very friendly with David Jaffe, who I worked on God of War with and Twisted Metal Black, if you guys remember that game. You know, we sort of revised Twisted Metal. And Dave believes there's no story in games. That's just his thought, and he and I have had the greatest debates about it. Because I think everything you do in the story, in game, is a story. Even if you're just playing Space Invaders, it's still a story, because your experience and your feeling and your emotions are tied to what you do. So I think once you say, if you're willing to accept that everything that you do in your day is frankly the story of your day, at that point then you can look at games and say, then how do we take games and use it, not to provide a linear story, which is something like GTA 5, which is still brilliant, right? But what storytelling is, I'm moving people's, we are emotional engineers, that's what we do. Even if it's just Space Invaders, we're still an engineer of people's emotions. Discuss.
Yeah, Andrew and I worked on a mythology convention here in town back in the aughts. And it was called Mythic Journeys, but one of our tag phrases was every life is a story. And it follows up on that whole idea that everything you do, everything you experience really becomes part of your story. And most people in our society don't think of it in these kind of coherent ways. We're actually really taught to fragment it and not put them all together in any kind of way. And one of the things about games, novels, comics, movies, is they give you models for actually being able to take all these fragments and kind of put them in some sort of coherent form. And the nice thing about games too, though, is then you can break that form the next time you play it or the next one, and it gets bigger and bigger in your ability to then be able to take the most crazy chaos and put some sort of order to it. I think gets better and better. That's one great thing about games is they train you to sort of be able to think that sort of way, even if you're not meta thinking on that level.
Yeah, see what you did there.
Yeah. Well, I'll take it in a little different angle. So intellectual property. It is something you own. It is something that you can sell, rent, lease. The ownership of intellectual property, the creation of intellectual property, is the lifeblood of your game, of your movie, of whatever. I have two very good friends, Lauren Lanning, Oddworld, and Rand Miller, Mist. Both of those guys had to fight for frickin' ever to get their IP back. And once they did, they're actually able to have a sustained life because they have control over that IP, and they can put out new versions of it, they can make, update the old games and make new games, but they have control over that property, and they can have a life from that. If you're just building things for other people, and you're not creating something new, something tangible, then it's just going to be sand through your hands, right? I mean, you want to create something that's going to have an impact and stick, and people are going to want more of.
And I want to tie these two threads together because I think that they're very much interlocked. What we did with HDI when we started the Fading Suns universe was it could have just been a single game and could have been done well enough as a game, but by making it a much larger IP with a much larger story than just what's happening in any one game, it could suddenly exist on multiple media. So we had a tabletop role-playing game, which was the personal experience of a dystopian future. We started with the idea of what's religion going to be like in 1,000, 2,000 years from now. And then we turned that into a role-playing game. Then we did a computer game, big, grand level strategies. We had the role-playing game for the individual experience. We had the strategy game for the grand galactic level, look down at the entire cosmos at once. And then we went into a live action game. So you could, again, kind of the mid-level between the two, personal experience and high-level experience, then a miniatures game, and so on. And it allowed us to look at one story from so many different angles than we ever could have just by doing the game in one medium. In addition, it allowed us to license it off in a bunch of different ways. And so there's one license holder for the role-playing game, there's another license holder for the miniatures game right now, and we can develop the titles we want to develop. So it works to both develop the story and to develop those revenues.
Well, one of the nice things when we were doing the strategy games at the same time as the role-playing game, building that universe together, is some of the requirements we had for the strategy game actually wound up solving some of the problems we had in the role-playing game that we wouldn't have necessarily thought through properly otherwise. The specific example being is that in science fiction role-playing games like Traveller and such, you can't stop your players from going anywhere once they have a spaceship, and guiding them into your preset story, or at least the setting that you've spent all this time detailing, is troublesome. But in the strategy game for Fading Suns, there had to be ways to control who owns what territory and who can go from what world to the next world. So we built this whole jump web, as it's called, of gates and stuff, these alien artifacts that only open certain paths. And because we had that built into the universe, and so the whole socio-political environment is built around the fact that this noble house owns this world and this world because they're right next to each other in terms of that gate travel. Who knows where they are in terms of actual space relations? But what matters is that space there, and you could control players' movement that way also. So we were able to build, I think, a much more coherent universe for a game master and a player to work through because we had a strategy game we were doing at the same time and could think on those levels and solve those problems.
So I think we come up with 3 really good reasons to have an IP. 1, to have a better look at your stories. 2, to solve problems in each of the different media. And 3, to make more money. So let's talk about what you actually do when you're creating an IP that is more than just one game. What are you looking at? What are the first things you're considering? I know that in Hollywood they often say character comes first, but in a lot of the games we do, setting, conflict, form, etc. comes first. So what do you actually want to look at first? What will make it work for you?
Well, it's interesting. I'll start that by saying Myst was the best-selling game of the 20th century. Disney looked to pick it up, and Brandon Robin got to the very end. There's this long line of people they had to talk to. Everyone's like, yeah, Myst will make the island, we'll turn Tom Sawyer Island into Myst Island, and we'll do this, and merchandising, and this. And they got to the film guy, like, so what's the story? And there's a lot there. I mean, if you play Myst, there's a lot of story there. But the story comes out of you playing, to Paul's point. It comes out of your experience and interaction with the environment and making the story come alive. There's no character, there's no depth, there's no background. There are a few characters, but it's not the way Hollywood thinks, and so it fell flat. So 20 years later, I finally closed the deal with Legendary, and they get it. And we got a really great writer on this to go out and pitch it. But it won't look exactly, if people have an image of what they think Myst is, the movie will not be exactly what Myst is, because Myst was walking around all by yourself.
I think that's a shame. I really do. I think that if you were more diligent, you could make the film be the game, be the comic book. You can. I love it when people say you cannot do something, because I'm like that. I'm not challenging stuff. I'm like Marty McFly when he says I can't do something. I'm like, what? So, what if you said instead of that, this is an existing piece of IP that made us feel a certain way in the 20th century, and we played it and felt this way, but it's very reflective of us. See a movie trailer, it says Brad Pitt is this dude. When you see the game trailer of the same IP, it says you are this dude. That has to be, it can't be based in ethnicity, gender. You may be a young girl who's 13 years old. You still are Johnny Wad, whatever it is. Bad example. It's old enough to understand. So the point is, I wish that we would say, well, look, let's take the form of game and the form of movie and comic. Comic books are easy because unlimited special effects budget. Blank paper, I can make, for the same cost, I can make a galaxy-spanning saga, then I can make a detective story. So why can't we get an understanding of games and say, this is the problem, these are the problems that I face. You know, I worked on a game called the Hulk Ultimate Destruction. This is the coolest game. It was like the weirdest thing. You could like surf on top of a bus. You could get a slug bug, you know, like a punch buggy, and pound it and then hit things. You know, it was supposed to be fun. But the one thing that you couldn't do was go in that door. Well, I'm the Hulk. I can tear that building down, can't walk in that door. You say no to the players, and the players say no to you. And it drove me crazy. So I started saying to myself, why can't we take the fiction of no, and you know, in a sense, what are our technical limitations in making this game, and wrap that into the fiction of the story. I can't go down that alleyway because the fiction says, oh no, there's a force field barrier. Well then great, I solved it. This is why you can't. You know, you might be powerful and everything, you can't go down that alleyway because there are technical limitations in the game, and I can't let you go down that alleyway because I just can't build an unlimited environment. But if you wrote that into the fiction, then the player has a justification to not go down the alleyway. That's how we should create these products, is to take the fiction and always say yes to the player, not say no to them.
So give a specific example of that with the IP. When you're planning for an IP, what are you doing?
Well,
how do you make sure it's that limitless?
I know what I'm doing is, I'm trying to, you know, obviously I'm creating cross media, right? So an example is, we are working here in the studio on a science fiction film, and what we're trying to do, and it's actually, its creation is really interesting. I was talking to my manager in Los Angeles, and he said, why don't people produce a film before they write it? And I thought that was such a great idea, you know, why not take the assets that we have in the studio, do a bunch of practical shoots. Frankly, some of the stuff that's been abandoned by these poor engineers that left, it looks like a science fiction film. So why not create a science fiction film here? And what we did then was say, okay, well, how can we cross this into different media? Why don't we make a story in which this particular character goes through a bunch of doors, and when he goes through doors, it's very much emulating going through a level in the game. And, you know, this happens when he goes through a door. Okay, great, then that happens in the game as well. That's how you create it, is you build out the story so that it's intentionally supposed to be built across the media if you want to do a cross-media story. If you just want to do a video game, have the fiction explain something. When I worked on The Darkness, which is a game, you know, we did a few years ago, at the time, the tech said, we have to do loading screens. So I hated it. I hated the idea that we have to do loading screens. You know what I'm doing? Playing my story, I'm this guy, and then I got to cross my arms and want loading. And I hated it. So I said to them, why can't we play a preloaded movie that plays when the loading happens, so at least I can advance my story. If you've got to take my hands off it because the tech's not there yet, great. At least let me learn more about the character. And they were like, oh, what a great idea. I'm like, why didn't we do that before? Like, why don't we think that way? We should. It's always story. Why can't we do, you know, that sounds quaint and archaic right now. Everybody does that now. But at the time, no one did. And another example is on Darkness 2, when I got to that, I, for years, have been pitching game developers to say, why can't we take, you never know who's speaking. Unless the voices are really different. If it's first person, you don't know who's speaking. So what I really wanted to do was to take the rumble function of the controller, and if we are speaking, it rumbles slightly to approximate a voice box. And they said, oh no, and they just, for years, developers wouldn't do it. We do it for Darkness 2, and every question on the first day of its release is, who thought of that? What a great idea. Why didn't we do that before? Like, we should be thinking that way. It's not the genius idea. It's, we don't think that way. We should think in terms of story every time we create an asset.
So, good, DJ?
Don't you think that it's easier? I mean, thinking in terms of the story to make the force field for the Hulk, or the loading screen, or the rumble, all that makes sense for your one property. Don't you think it's easier to make a cross-property idea or to solve cross-property problems when you do them all at once? In other words, it's, I think, a whole lot easier to, when you open your IP, say, I'm going to make a multimedia IP, how do I resolve these problems?
Mm-hmm.
Or looking at play engine, where I'm saying that I'm going to solve this problem over here, which results over here, because we're doing it at the same time, versus taking Myst 10 years after the fact and trying to say, how do I make a movie out of this? It's a lot more trouble to make good IP, not IP, because people make crappy IP out of everything. It's a lot of trouble making good IP out of already existing, already well-known, already entrenched ideas.
Well, one of the, again, back to the advantage, we had developing a strategy game at the same time as our IP. We got to bring those elements in. But tabletop role-playing games have been ahead of the curve on a lot of other media that are catching up now in a big way, which is that because of the sheer mechanics of it, you've got people sitting around a table and everybody needs a role to play. It was built around an ensemble rather than a single character. Even old ensemble shows like Star Trek still was really Kirk and then two other guys and the rest are color. So in a role-playing game, everybody is equally part of the ensemble, and you're seeing much more of that in other TV shows, Lost, Firefly, things like that. You're starting to see it in, obviously, the MMOs have finally caught up to the RPG or additional tabletop RPGs in that open world. And the whole backgrounds of everybody have to be built around accommodating anybody's vision for a character.
I think that TJ hit on something. When we were doing the White Wolf project, and we had one IP, World of Darkness, and then there were 5 games within that: Vampire, Werewolf, Mage, Changeling, and Raid. Why don't you talk about what's actually involved in trying to plan between 5 different games within one IP and pretending we've got it all planned in the game?
Bingo, you have to pretend, yeah, we meant that all along. Because you're continually changing your ideas and revising them as they go along. And so, yeah, it would have helped if we had all those games pre-envisioned, but we waited for the lightning to strike when the deadlines were coming, and so then you do it. Whereas when we reinvented the World of Darkness with the new World of Darkness in the aughts, we did much more have that luxury. We already knew vampires, werewolves, and we had some idea of how they were going to be in the new world. And we were able to build, say, the tabletop rule set, for instance, to more carefully balance vampires versus werewolves, whereas the first time around, werewolves got to be really kind of wahoo and overbalanced over the vampires and so on. And yet, you're supposed to be playing in the same world. So, you know, it helps, like you said, if you can sit down and say, okay, we're going to do a strategy game, we're going to do these things, even if, you know, the game isn't funded, think that way and maybe think through some of the problems. It's certainly a better way to do it.
I'd also say something, because we are talking to game guys, you know, gameplay is critical, right? I mean, there's lots of games where the IP doesn't mean shit, because it's the gameplay that's really the fun of it all. But, and the second breath of that is, you know, the game mechanics in Angry Birds was in a bunch of other games before that. I think Crush the Castle or something like that. I mean, and it was there, right? But it was those stupid pigs and birds that gave this sketch of a story on top of it, but it gave characters, it gave merchandising, it gave billions and billions of dollars. So that's kind of the other value of IP in terms of story. And then I don't mean to belittle story in games, because to me, game story is really important. But there's also times when the subtle dressing of story on a really good game mechanic will give you an IP that goes much further.
But
than anywhere
isn't
else.
a great game mechanic still a story? There's my broader definition. Because let's say that we'll take the Hulk as an example, right? You know, like let's say you're playing a Hulk game. The best thing you could want out of a Hulk game is I want to smash stuff up, and it's kind of why I bought the title, so I can blow stuff up. But what we do as game storytellers, even if it's just how the game is played, this is not like what happened to the Hulk or Bruce Banner's story, this is how it feels to play it. I feel powerful if I play the game and I smash stuff up. When that developer came to me, they said, yeah, when we brought out our first game with that Ang Lee movie, we blew it, but I don't know why. I don't know what happened to it. I looked at the first game because I wasn't familiar with the first game, and I swear it took me probably 20 seconds to know why their first game had failed. And it was simple. It was all in the game design. It was in how you played the game. It wasn't in the story that they told. If you played the first game, what happens is you kind of get railed through a tunnel. That means you go through the game, you come around a corner, there's a bunch of tanks and stuff. That doesn't make you feel like a badass, it makes you feel like a victim. I turned the corner and a bunch of people shot at me. So the first thing that I suggested was, why aren't we got a free roaming game? The only way in which we're going to feel powerful is if we have the capability of standing on a building. If we initiate combat, we're a badass. But if we get shot at, we're not badass. In a sense, it was the gameplay that damaged the characterization. So we can do this always. We can always say, well, why don't we look at what our gameplay is like? If it makes me feel You know, you're the Hulk, you just beat your first tank. And you turn around, and this isn't a story particularly, now there's 20 tanks in front of you, and you go, oh man, how do I do this? That's emotional engineering. That's making someone feel powerful and then blowing them up all through gameplay, all through the challenges that you throw in front of somebody. So let's be careful. You know, let's not separate gameplay as if it's not storytelling. It absolutely is storytelling. It's engineering people's emotion.
Yeah, I mean, in the industry, there's that separation between game designers and writers. Game designers design it, and it's handed off to the writers to color on top of. And it really should be, they should be working together the entire way.
That's how I do. I get right in. I don't know how to program. I want to know what programmers can tell me. I'll have a layman's understanding, a pretty informed layman's understanding, but I want to know what you know. If you can tell me something I don't know, I can write into that. And that's how we should be doing it, I think. It's really working hard about building the games on it.
Like I said, living up to that piece of the Hulk, I mean, you want to smash that to the Hulk. And the Alan Lee movie, a friend of mine took his kid to it, 20 minutes in, the kid's like, Dad, where's the Hulk? Right there, you failed, you know? And so, I mean, back to the importance of IP, this was an IP that was developed in a different medium entirely than games. And yet, God knows who doesn't want to play the Hulk smashing things.
But they didn't, you know, the filmmakers and even the comic book people, they didn't care about the game. That's been a constant theme to me in my time in the industry, is that the filmmakers look at the game players, game designers, and they go, yeah, whatever, like, we're filmmakers. Like, who wouldn't love us? Game developers.
It's just an ancillary license problem.
So one thing I'm hearing from everybody right now is that one of the things game developers have to have are core themes that matter. Hulk Smash is a theme for making Hulk games. Core hooks that'll go through. What are some other core things that should be had in an IP for it to be successful? We talked about character, we talked about setting.
I don't say characters, plural, because if everybody thinks in terms of character, it's going to be a limited world. Okay, you can have one person that goes to the world, but the more you develop that world, okay, but what's around that corner? Who's that guy? What's he all about? What's his story?
So Street Fighter is not just about guile?
Bingo. Street Fighter is another perfect example of an ensemble of characters. You want to know who each one's about, what their powers are.
Yeah.
I think it's hugely important these days. I mean, you being one character is going to be increasingly smaller role in games, I think. The more you get into the world.
I think it's a difficult question to answer.
Let me just throw in a real quick thing. It's like Twilight. One of the reasons I don't think Twilight.
You said it.
The reason I don't think Twilight has gone much farther than its books and movies.
Is it Twinkly Vampire?
It's because it's all about those characters. No one wants to play in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Whereas you take Harry Potter, everybody can imagine their own character going to Hogwarts, going to school, becoming, I'm going to be an orator, or I'm going to be somebody else when I grow up. And that had a world to breathe in.
What if I want to be a sparkly vampire?
What's that?
What was it?
What if I want to be a sparkly vampire?
You're on your own.
Have fun, Sparky.
Enjoy it.
Well, let's take it from another side. All of us have worked on other people's IPs or controlled other people's IPs to a great degree. So Blake, let's start off with you. As the IP holder looking to develop that IP into new media, what do you need to keep in mind? What do you need to look for?
It's a big question, because for one thing, I think when you create the IP, your false point is you really want to be true to yourself. You're trying to tell a story, you're trying to sell something that is really important to you, right? I mean, I don't want everybody to go out here going, I'm going to break down, I'm going to analyze exactly what I'm going to do, I'm going to create an IP that's going to be successful. It's got to be authentic, first and foremost. The reason I like working with Paul is, I mean, he's thinking in these bigger ways about how we look at things across media, and that is in and of itself another creative way to do things, right? So, I'm not answering your question at all.
He's edging. Can I add something into that?
Yeah.
To help you to kind of galvanize the answer is this. I have a 3-year-old and a 9-year-old, and it's interesting to me to watch my 9-year-old get his ass kicked by the 3-year-old in a video game. But I'll tell you why. Because the 9-year-old very, very imaginative little boy. He's afraid of the dark, wants to sleep with the light on, and he's very timid when he plays a video game. I don't know if I want to go downstairs into Terraria because, there's demons down there. A 3-year-old's like, I don't give a shit.
And that's what he said.
It's like, I don't give a shit. Well, he does. I wonder where he got that from. So, what that's a reflection of is, and we'll go back to the Hulk,
Yeah.
maybe. If I'm a timid player, then I'm timid Hulk because he always has these incarnations. And if I'm an aggressive player, I'm an angry or aggressive Hulk.
Yeah.
Like, we each adapt to the tools that a game has given us. So the story's never the same. As game developers, we're trying to provide the elements that people can play. So maybe it sparks the answer that especially about being an IP holder, which is you're giving them the tools and the environment and the opportunity to feel something. But opinions and or experiences may vary, simply because of the human being that plays a game.
And I'll take this, and this is not where you want to go at all, but it's just a thing happened. At the time I was at Turner, we were trying to buy, actually, Cyan was creating something called Parable, which became Mist Online. We almost bought it, and then we got bought by AOL. And so all of our investment money went away. And the idea of buying this Mist Online, this Parable, was it was creating a content network that was unlike any other content network, where the content was you and story were infused into the world on a regular basis rather than episodes that you sat and watched. So at that same time, I went up to see what AOL was investing in, and they were going to invest in something called Second Life. And I was like, why the hell would you want to go into an empty world when you could have this rich world full of IP and imagination? Well, what do I know? I mean, so IP is still important. The fact is that within Second Life, people wanted to create their own IP. They wanted to express their own IP. They wanted to express themselves through that. So, at the same time, IP is very, very important for you and your business and stuff like that. It's also so important that people also want to express it. So, I think back to Paul's point is allowing these story frameworks, whatever they may be, whether they're mechanics or they're full-fledged games, to allow the user to get in and really experience their own story.
I think the best part of Second Life, by the way, was that I didn't know what it was, and someone who's a musician that worked with. And she built this beautiful thing. You could go in Second Life and you could touch the orbs and it would play like Jean-Michel Jarre's live concert. You could play this music and it had this really tonality. I said, yeah, but what else is there? And she said, you know what to do is to fly above the world, see the clusters of concentration of people. It's kind of, gets denser and denser, and then go down there. I go down there every single time I went to a concentration of people, it was pornography. Porn was taken over Second Life.
Mist Online didn't have that.
Yeah, they definitely did.
You see, look at the money you left on the table.
But I think I've had a conversation at some point that the idea that as game writers, we love the stories we make, but we have to know that the stories we create are always secondary to the stories the players create in their own head. And there has to be that space for players to be able to create those stories. Like Paul was saying, even in Space Invaders are creating stories. Even in Tetris, some people are creating stories. So I guess the other question is, how do you create a context where you can create specific stories, non-interactive stories for comics, movies, TV, and then also be able to allow players to create their own stories for games, interactive technologies, and so on?
Obviously, this is where I go, and I think if you just have to respect the medium, maybe that's the best way to do it. Like, the problem with filmmakers is they struggle to respect the medium of game creation. And that's not really healthy if you genuinely want to make something great. But the truth is, let's understand, it's not that people always really want to make something great. They want to make something that makes a lot of money. So, what's the impetus for a filmmaker, a producer on a film, to be working on a license for a game and have that game be great if it makes more money for them to have the game come out on time and get rated at 4.5 out of 10? Our goal can and should be, but it's a much bigger endeavor. Let's create a game that is a film, that is all of this stuff. But we have to look at it by saying, we intend to respect the differences of the medium, right? So I respect the medium of games because I believe it's a form of art. Everybody plays. Cats and dogs play, bears play, we play. But play is a form of self-expression, perhaps. It's a form of emotional movement. So is the cathartic act of sitting and watching a movie, or a play, or a television show, or reading a comic. They're all different forms. If we respect the form, and we can tie our respect of each of them, they each have equal billing. So in the science fiction concept that I was telling you about, the game has absolutely equal billing. In fact, game elements continue to inform the story of the film. So the things that I want to develop out in the game are going to be written into the script so that the two of them do combine. I think we have historically a minus 5% success rate in that with a 5% margin of error. We suck at it. We suck at it. And we don't have to suck at it. We could be brilliant at it. But it's just a choice. And by the way, just too much information maybe, but it's like the issues are, I know how to get a film funded, I know how to get a game funded, but people funding a film and funding a game have very different expectations. Maybe that's been an obstacle. That just simple thing as funding two projects at the same time has become challenging. So we're just trying to build out here and build.
Well, like you said, the respect is a big thing. The formation of all IP is all over the place. I mean, there was an interview to bring back Hulk again. Mark Ruffalo was on the internet today. Apparently the reason they're not doing individual Hulk films now is because Universal still has part of the distribution rights. So they would have to give them a cut. Like, why give somebody a cut on something we just could do something else instead? So until that's resolved, you're not going to get another individual Hulk film.
Can anybody tell us why Halo isn't already a film? Right? Like, why was not being Oh yeah, I'm sure they're making it. Yeah.
10 years.
Big the hell out of it. Or Assassin's Creed, which
They're making that one, I think. Yeah, I've been here, they've been making World of Warcraft for the past 15 years.
Sure, but you
Well,
get
they got a director.
you get Assassin's Creed, and they've announced they're going to make Assassin's Creed, and I say, you know, there's something beautiful about the fact that when they make the third central one, you are in this environment, in this society, with all the paranoia and xenophobia, you're helping Muslims protect mosques. And I'm like, man, how brilliant of a story is it? Why can't we ever get that beautiful feeling in a movie? Why didn't we already have that beautiful feeling in a movie? Why didn't we feel Grand Theft Auto as a movie? Why have we not done that yet? We haven't done it because of these horrible obstacles that we've written.
All right, well, let me throw out one last question, and we'll open up to the floor. If there was one piece of advice you could give anybody making a game, what they could do to generate a better IP than what they're already doing, what would it be? I'll throw out a pretty obvious one that's used by a lot of game developers, which is to create much more than you'll ever need. So if you're making a game, create more backstory, create more characters, create more action than you'll ever actually implement in the game, but come up with them because it'll broaden the world, make it richer, make it more alive, and will help you think through, like Bill was saying, other problems that you hadn't considered in the first place. So really, what would you...
I'll say an empty world needs a bunch of onion layers of mystery that you can keep peeling away, but they should be in the form of questions and not answers. So you don't have to know the answers necessarily. They don't ever have to necessarily learn the answers, as long as there are enough revelations they can go through towards that in a way.
And continue to stimulate player creative.
Right, and you want to leave it open yourself, because the better idea is going to come along when you finally do have to feel you have the answer.
Lose your ego, be prepared to kill your darlings. Anything that you've ever created, be prepared to kill it. Because if it doesn't serve the story, it doesn't serve the story.
I'm reading a great book now because I need to understand story better. It's called Story. And
Robert McKee.
yeah, Robert McKee.
Oh my God, I got Twilight much.
Well, I'm telling you, well, he's a writer, so he might have better, but I tell you, it changed my world in terms of how I look at the story, especially from a game design standpoint, because he really breaks it down into the understanding. And I would just say this, make sure you don't become a cliche of everything that has existed before you. I mean, really try and find something unique about what it is that you're saying, or your gameplay, or how it's all coming together. And that doesn't mean, how many detective shows are there, or how many, whatever, but I just, and this is not a detective show, but I just watched Peaky Blinders on, have you seen that?
Oh, yeah.
Fucking best ending of the second series I've ever seen in my life. I was like jumping up going, I never saw that coming. So, it's that. I mean, you've seen that story before, but I'll go and talk about this show for a long time because the writers and the directors took it and made it authentic and gave it something unique. I couldn't tell you what is unique about it, but it resonated with me. So that's all I'd say on that. It's a big thing, but really look to be authentic in what you're doing and find that, whether it's a twist or that turn or that just originality that makes it something different.
Can I add one more thing? Sorry. I believe that, you know, one of the problems that we get into is that we don't, you talk about believability.
Mhm, yes.
And I think that we don't make these commitments to believability. I think that we just at that last moment go, this is safe. And stop it. Like, don't be safe. Be audacious. Audacity is not writing or showing something that explodes and robots or whatever. We've done that. Audacity is being able to say, I believe that in this story they have to sit in that cafe and sit over a cup of coffee and talk for 4 minutes. That's audacity. Believe what you really, really think is coming. And I think that we tend to get scared of a difficult choice and then we spend hours developing something when we should have really gone with the thing that we knew was going to make sense.
I'm going to throw it open to the audience.